Hello, and welcome back to Kaiserreich. Oh, oh boy. Hmm. We'll see. We'll see how we go. We're in March. Elections in April. All right, Ostwald complete. We need a second expedition to China. Seriously. That's our priority right now. Huh. We can buff Bukhara? I should be taking that. But no, seriously, we need second expedition to China. Didn't these guys accept volunteers from us? These are guys? These are guys. Okay. Believe so. Okay. Anyways. Not great. The German agrarian crisis. The German agricultural sector is struggling for years at this point. Has suffered a great economic crisis sparked by Black Monday market crash. It's the latest step in the persistent decline of German agriculture ever since the 19th century. The culmination of many years of inefficient, outdated methods, unfortunate global market developments since installing, poorly future-oriented agrarian policies. Compared to its Western competitors, such as Britain or the United States, German agriculture has consistently lagged behind in efficiency. 25% of all arable land across the empire is held by 0.2% of the landowners, most of which are operating in eastern Elbia. But since the late 1920s, small and mid-sized farmers across the nation have started to feel the effects of this looming efficiency crisis as well. Steady price erosion for agricultural goods due to cheap competition from abroad and shriveling purchasing power have slowly led to many farmers into the never-ending downward spiral of growing indebtedness. What could initially be battled with the reintroduction of protective tariffs or import quotas, undoubtedly a controversial policy instrument within Middle Europa, has, at the end of the day, only postponed the inevitable. With the collapse of the German banking sector, the looming crisis will soon aggravate as many estates and enterprises which have relied on loans to stay afloat are bound to default on those in the near future, and the collapsing demand for agricultural goods could be the nail in the coffin. A substantial crisis has already begun to fuel the DKP electoral campaign and has placed the question of drastically different agriculture policy on the agenda. What many seem to have forgotten, though, is the fact that the Conservatives are partially responsible themselves for this dilemma via their candidate in the State Secretariat of Agriculture, Martin Schley, and his controversial agrarian policies during the last decade. For now, his political fate is on the knife's edge. The great Juncker estates are a thing of the past. Uh-oh. Okay. The Krivich push. It's a putsch. The Krivik putsch. With Germany's economy shaken by a severe agricultural crisis, the repercussions were quickly felt in European hegemons' eastern satellites. White Ruthenia, a small and young nation, was soon rocked by instability after growing agitation for radical leftist elements in the country. The army intervened and deposed the elected Social Democratic government. After a brief power struggle, the vacuum was filled by none other than Vaclav Latuski. I know I didn't get that right. Leader of the National Populist Peasants Party, Green Oak, historian and writer. Latuski was heavily involved in White Ruthenia's struggle for independence from Russia. Deeply Russophobic, he has hoped to purge the country completely of Russian influences and reshape White Ruthenian national identity around the medieval Krivik tribe. With a resurgent Russia, a war of survival now appears inevitable. Perfect allies against the Russian threat. Yay. Oh, that's why there was a problem, because we got kicked out of Restoration of Democracy. Cool. It's fine. Fine by me. Military seizes power in Mexico. Oh, crud. Huh. I probably should have sent troops earlier. I don't know if I could have altered the equation. Sylvia Pankhurst, elected chairwoman of the TUC. Okay. Passed? Okay. Well, at least we didn't waste any time. I'll go German and American Self-Defense Associations, I guess? Huh. Maybe we want a military mission to Constantinople. Get railway plans. Ooh. Control the economy, you say? I am thinking. The thing we might need first... This is so pointless. This is so pointless. These guys are not going to win their war. World tension's not high enough for that to matter. We'll do a military mission to Constantinople. Sure. Gallo seizes control of Ecuador. KMT and Indian socialists overthrew Tibet. It is a cycle, not change. Okay. City council elections in Berlin. The term of the incumbent mayor of Berlin, Heinrich Sahm, is set to expire, and a new election is thus stated to be held in Berlin City Council. A technocratic independent, Sahm served as the mayor of several other cities in the past before moving to Berlin, generally supported by local liberal and conservative deputies. Political upheaval after black money gives an opportunity for the Berlin Social Democrats to win elections to the city council and appoint one of their own. Otto Ostrowski, current mayor of the Prenzlauer Berg borough of Berlin. Ostrowski is seen as a member of the left-wing faction of the SDP, and a victory for him would signal a significant change. In Berlin politics, it would also be a bellwether of the nation's turn to the left and power social democratic activity in other cities. Because of this, LVP and DKP have joined forces in Berlin, seeking to keep Sahm in power and return victory for the right and center. Once the election comes and passes, the result is Ostrowski wins or Heinrich Sahm wins. Well, we're playing as the SDP, so I think we're going to throw our weight behind Ostrowski. Oh, it's Ostrowski. How did I mess that up? Ostrowski. Yeah, so Ostrowski will win. We've not been ultra buffing the super left-wing nerds. Democratic Union formed! Reorganization is taking place amongst the German parties. The Social Democratic and Liberal LVP have announced an official agreement on cooperation in the 1936 Reichstag elections. The agreement made between Hermann Mueller and Erich Koch, their respective party chairmen, entails a joint candidates in key constituencies and common policies the two parties will push to relieve the effects of the Black Monday crisis in the next Reichstag. These policies include banking reform, public works, and other employment measures. In addition, both parties have professed their loyalty to the achievements of the March reforms of the Constitution, their dedication to defending them from encroaching conservatives, hence the name Democratic Union. Before and during the Weltkrieg, the Progressive People's Party, FVP, was a close ally of the SDP and persistently ended up in the shadow. With the unification of the liberal parties, the LVP was seen as a way how to escape the shadow and allow German liberals and powerful force in its own right. The LVP's decision to restore its alliance with the SDP thus shows that ultimately they were unable to avoid their fate as a secondary power. Together for a democratic German empire. Another pope. Cooperation with Fangtian. Yeah, so we may be called upon to defend the Qing. Somehow Afghanistan hasn't lost yet. I mean, we could send volunteers there if we wanted, but why? 9th International! We don't care. Okie dokie. Okay. Alright, so Zentrum is getting buffed either way. Zentrum has seen better days. Since the end of the Will Creek, the party has helped form all 10 cabinets, whether the left, right, or center, a strategy that has left it sorely unprepared for these times of polarization, as it now struggles to keep voters away from the SDP, DVLP, and upstart agrarian parties. Under these conditions, the party's ruling cadre has begun to waver. Zentrum's current chairman, Theodore von Guerard, served for the last 5 years with an eye on managing the party's various factions, but he's indicated that should Centrum be pushed from power in the coming elections, he'll retire from his position. The news has put the entire party on maneuvers, and the first blow has come from the right flank. Heinrich Held, the Bavarian minister-president, has published an article in the Kölnische Volkszeitung on the party's future, which he calls not only for a strong commitment to the regional and conservative issues, but for the party to reach out to Protestant voters. Dun dun dun. Willing to defend both. In throwing the glove forth, Held revisits one of the party's most contentious debates. Over time, many rightists and trade unionists have entertained the idea of taking Zentrum, quote, out of the tower, transforming it from a purely Catholic party to an all-Christian People's Party. In their eyes, such a party could unite the middle class, working class, and rural interests by a bulwark against the growing left. Held's remarks on Christian unity have been echoed by leading trade unionist Adam Sengerwald, who many believe to be a front-runner to succeeding von Gerard. The party's progressives watch these developments with concerns. In the recent years, the left flank have championed the Catholic nature of Zentrum out of the fear that Protestant voters would draw their party to the right, and indeed both Hyde and Steigerwald have suggested overtures to the EKP and even more rightward parties. The strongest rebuttal to Held's articles comes from the leading Baden progressive Joseph Wirth, who argues that such adventures risk the party's position in the center and the trust of their Catholic electorate at a critical time. Whether Wirth's words will be heeded is an open question. So do we want to strengthen the left or right wing? I think because we're left wing, we want to strengthen the left wing. It may be unintuitive that might actually be the wrong choice. Okay. It's almost April. Do we have more butins we can press? Well, once we have political power, yes. That's fine. Okay. Huh. Yeah, we maybe need to do a new Eastern European partnership. We'll see. So we can pump our Eastern colonies for cash. Oh boy. The Kenyatta Affair! Great. A rather unique case has been sluggishly pathing through a legal system for years. Now it has reached the highest court in the German state. Anti-colonial activist Jomo Kenyatta has brought a class action lawsuit against former Middle African administration for its conduct during the 1925 pacification of Kenya. This case has become something of a political embarrassment, as some plaintiffs are British settlers. It cannot be easily dismissed. They claim that the Schutztruppe harmed them through the process of illegal land seizures and even abductions and tortures, all done with the knowledge of the Middle African administration and with little legal basis. While the main parties are no longer part of our administration, commenters have noted that the court could potentially set a precedent as to what is permissible extent of rule bending by our colonial administrations is. We have nothing to fear. Oh boy. Oh boy. Oh, good. It's... Alright, Yugi boy. It's time to play a card game. This is what I was waiting for. It's happening 14 minutes in the episode. Great. Having been in free fall for the past months, the economic crisis finally reached a modicum of stability, or at least it doesn't have much elsewhere to fall. The least stable companies and banks have gone under. Now, the more durable ones compete in a shrunken, silenced environment. Investor trust is at an all-time low, so new investments are non-existent and production stagnates, and of course, millions of workers who had stable jobs last year are now in the streets, desperate for work. But companies shaken by the financial collapse are very hesitant to expand and employ more workers again. Initial surprise and shock in the German government has subsided, and their secretariats and ministries may begin developing solutions. The amount of work is enormous. The state must somehow recover the economy of the empire back to its old heights, taking on challenges which may require wildly different financial strategies each. The bureaucrats and officials will thusly eagerly await the results of the April election. Perhaps the next government will have the political capital needed for this necessary action, which will restore the miracle of the Golden 20s. Cards. What? There they are. Yeah. All right. I was like, it's time to duel with the economy. Okay. The Black Monday trading card game. It's amazing. Okay. It's a turn-based game which you must play against the crisis and defeat it in a match of wits and strategy. This is incredible. People did not like this when it came out, as far as I understand. I considered doing a Let's Play of it and then realized it's going to be really complicated. So I'm doing it now. Every 15 days, you will draw a hand from your deck of cards, including 3 types: relief, recovery, and reform. If you know about, if you're a scholar of American history, like moi, you know that the relief, recovery, and reform were also, there's the 3 R's associated with the New Deal. I mean, it's the same problem, and I'm sure that if you're like British or whatever, or French, you're like, yeah, that's what our government tried to do too. Relief, recovery, reform. These cards can boost one another, draw more cards, give you advantage, or simply deal investment or stability score your attack and defense. This is incredible. Okay, sure. At the end of the round, you must surpass the crisis's stagnation, economic decline, while also being aware the mounting toll takes on your debt. You cannot reach a certain level of debt. Aye. Okay. Okay. So Okay, current crisis, a liquidity crisis. Money creation cards will be more effective. So, like, I'm going to try money issuing. Bam. Okay. I think holding on to cards is not very useful. Okay, I need to have a bigger... Yeah, what's the rule? You must use your cards to raise the value to meet or exceed the economic decline score to reduce the effects of the Black Monday crisis. So, I bet if this number exceeds, it's a waste. I think we need relief. Do some capital controls. This is a relief card. This was a... wasn't just not described anymore. So we're playing another relief card. Okay. Okay. We don't have any reforms, so Counselor on the Radio will do nothing. If we do this... Is it meet or beat? To meet or exceed the crisis economic decline score to reduce the effects. So cooperation with business, I'm not going to do, and comms with the radio, I obviously am not going to do. I've heard advice that you actually want to wait a little bit to play new cards, because you might get stuff from, like, events. But, okay. A verdict! Years of legal battle come to an end earlier today when litigation of Jomo Kenyatta ended at the highest court of Germany. While the QQ lawyer has successfully defended his points, the defense was represented by renowned political theorist Carl Schmitt. A jurist proposed a novel defense that has established a new legal precedent. The Schutztruppe command has allegedly acted in the interest of the state by taking the necessary steps to ensure the integrity of our empire in a state of exception. The finer details of Schmidt's case were largely based on his essay on political theology, which gave birth to the phrase, "Sovereign is he who decides on the exception." Whether Schmitt intends this or not, this phrase has become a catchphrase for a more hardline approach to colonial governments. What is this nonsense? Yeah, so the idea of... this is relevant because this is something that former President Donald Trump was calling for relatively recently in his own particular way, which is a state of exception is basically the idea of, like, it's like a politically necessary The Purge. Like, if you know the movie The Purge, it's like, what if crime were legal for a day? Basically, it is a legal version of that, but specifically for, like, enforcers of the government. The idea is, and you see this bouncing around in terms of people justifying all sorts of state terror, is, listen, you need to defend the existence and power of the state. Any action undertaken to do that is fundamentally legitimate. And this can be anything from rounding up class enemies, rounding up race enemies, letting cops do things they really shouldn't be, letting, like, the military do things it really shouldn't, letting government officials do crimes and get away with that. This is the idea that, like, it is essentially like a informal version of the Rome's dictatorship. If you're a Star Wars fan, then you're like, oh, it's like with Palpatine and the emergency powers. Yes, that's it. That's a state of exception, which is like, things are so bad that we need to we are now in a state of exception. We're making exception to the normal rules that govern our society. Now, so Sulla, Rome's first, like, real dictator for life guy, who broke outside the bounds of... Roman dictatorships had pretty strict terms, and in spite of what you might think, being the dictator of Rome actually seemed to work pretty fine for a while, because there's sort of an almost a tacit understanding of the point of that office. But as Rome got more successful, it began to break down as an institution that was effective for that. So, one of the things that Sulla does, Sulla fights a war with Marius. I'm not going to get into the details. Sulla fights a war with Marius. It's a civil war. He wins. Marius, I think, dies before he can be held accountable, if that's the right word for it, for any of the stuff that he did. But Sulla ends up on top. And Sulla is basically, like, he engages in what is essentially a state of exception. He undertakes a bunch of purges, names himself dictator for life, and then retires from the dictatorship after a few years, I think. After he implements a bunch of reforms. And he's like, perfect, I've done a great job. I've saved the Republic. This is what people who like the idea of state of exception will point to as sort of like, that is what this is arguing for. The state was in this period of crisis. Sulla comes in, does a bunch of violence against enemies of the state, fixes things, and then leaves. Great. Except not so great, because every single greedy bastard Every single ambitious guy in Rome after that saw what Sulla did and wanted to do it themselves. And of course, eventually, someone does. This guy is named Caesar. And we all know how that goes. If you don't, you should watch Historia Civilis. It's really good. It's a good channel. Um, it goes through that. So if there is, I think, a argument against the state of exception, besides I don't like the people who are being targeted as enemies, or I don't like the way that enemies are selected. Like, obviously you can be like state of exception and then just like purge a bunch of ethnic minorities or whatever, or purge members of a political faction that, like, it might become a leopard eating faces thing, where it's like, oh no, I wanted the state of exception to destroy my enemies, but it's actually destroying people I like. Yeah, well, that's what happens when you let unregulated state violence do unregulated state violence. But basically, if I'm going to point to a more systemic problem, assuming that everything goes well with your little state of exception, that you let people act in the interest of the state without regard for law, hey, like, what's going to stop people from just making this the new normal? You can't unring that bell, or at least it's really hard not to. Like, once you let people just do whatever the heck they want in defense of the interests of whatever, what you're essentially saying is that the law is optional. It's only a sometimes. It's a sometimes food. Law is something that we do. Law is for the little people. Law is for people who don't have the power to declare this state of exception. And it's like, in practical fact, this sort of stuff happens all the time. Like, we let people get away with stuff when it's convenient to us all the time. Well, us is doing a lot of work there. Powerful people allow other powerful people to get away with things all the time because, well, we liked it. And the truth is, this will happen with, like, randos. I think there's a famous story of a dude getting shot some random guy getting shot in an American town in front of, like, 70 witnesses, and none of them say they saw anything. And I think there's a comment from one of them. It's like, well, some people just need killing. And it's like, okay, that's normal people enacting this sort of state of exception. The problem in, like, this will happen. It's essentially unavoidable that, like, if you give somebody the power to enact state violence, it's going to be kind of abused. Doesn't matter what situation it's in. Certain situations will cause it to happen more often than others. But it will happen regardless, as long as somebody has the power to enforce the will of the majority. There will be violations of the rights of minorities, even if those rights allegedly are ironclad. This will happen. The problem with instituting a systematized version of this, or making consistent, reliable exceptions, like consistent, reliable states of exceptions, is that it is eroding even the existence of an idea of, like, the law. I am not bringing this up because this is necessarily like, oh wow, it's so good to have a rule of law. It's so, like, virtuous and meaningful to have this. I am bringing it up because having consistent rules, maybe I'm showing a certain conservatism here, but there are not very many conservatives who I hear say this, so, like, I don't know, man. Having a consistent set of rules produces a society that's stable. It's predictable. If you know that certain things can happen and other things can't happen, great. You have a beautiful, wonderful situation where people can plan in the long term. Plan things out in measures of years, or at least many months, because they know that, okay, the system how it works now is probably going to work this way in 5 years. If you keep making states of exception, you're blowing up any pretense of stability. And, like, I think this is a, if you are clever, you can really apply this to nearly any ideology that proposes something shaped like a state of exception. This is the problem with any right-wing ideology that indulges in things that are, so, you could point to, with like, okay, well, ignoring the ethics of it, there are problems with, like, racist or sexist systems where they're just strictly inefficient for anyone, well, just generally. But one of the problems is that it also tends to produce these state of exception style results. It having these people are in the law, these people are out of the law, produces situations that where people would get kicked out or brought in to this in the law out the law space. It's bad for stability. But obviously this can happen with permanent revolution. That's also can lead to, it's not the same thing, but it is naturally going to lead itself towards state of exception style situations where and this is when conservatives throughout history, when they whinge about mob rule, this is one of the problems that they, I think, correctly identify as being associated with that. The problem with their complaint is typically their inability to identify that style of state of exception mob rule that can occur with an oligarchy or a monarchy as well. Even if you take the most powerful people in the room and you exclude, quote unquote, the rabble, which is everyone who's watching this video, by the way. I mean, most everyone who's watching this video is a robot. But besides that, anyone who might be this far into a random Kaiserreich video. Problem with that is that you get rich jerks in a room, they're going to act like a crazed mob just as much as poor people will. Oh boy. Wow, what an incredible waste of your time. I think I'm just going to call it into the video. And you know what? This thing I've been putting my cursor on this whole time. What is this nonsense? That's the way I feel. All right. We're gonna okay. We're gonna come back in with our Black Monday card game in the next episode. See you then. Bye-bye.